Most Americans think retirement is simple. Find warm weather, cheaper homes, and everything else works itself out. Here's what almost no one talks about. That shortcut is exactly why many retirees quietly struggle later. Places that look affordable on the surface can slowly drain savings through rising insurance costs, limited medical access, and local expenses people don't notice until after the move. Location doesn't just shape lifestyle. It compounds decisions every single day. That's why the towns strategic Americans choose next may completely reset what you think retirement should look like. What strategic retirement actually means in the South. Strategic retirement in the South isn't about chasing the cheapest homes or the hottest weather, even though that's what most people are told to prioritize. Based on widely reported affordability metrics, safety statistics, tax structures, insurance trends, and regional healthcare availability, the towns that consistently work best over time share a different pattern. They balance affordability with stability, access to medical care with manageable growth, and lifestyle perks with predictable long-term costs. You'll notice that towns trending online often get expensive fast, while places that stay under the radar quietly protect both savings and peace of mind. Honestly, strategic retirement isn't about guessing the future. It's about recognizing patterns that keep repeating, which leads directly to Town 10, where this approach becomes impossible to ignore. Town 10, Dahlonega, Georgia. Town 10 is Dahlonega, Georgia. And here's what surprised me when researching this town. Based on publicly available data, Dahlonega consistently shows up as one of those places that feels quietly stable rather than aggressively cheap, which turns out to matter more over time. Dahlonega sits at the edge of the Blue Ridge Mountains, and that geography shapes daily life in a way people don't expect from Georgia. Summers are warm, winters stay mild, and the mountain setting keeps the climate more balanced than lower elevation southern towns. The town's population stays relatively small, which helps preserve walkability, community events, and local services without constant expansion pressure. Dahlonega's historic downtown, shaped by its early gold rush history, creates a built-in sense of place that doesn't rely on tourism alone to survive. You'll notice how retirees here aren't chasing nightlife or growth, but consistency, access to regional healthcare hubs, and a pace that feels intentional. Housing prices remain more approachable than larger metro areas nearby. Yet the area benefits from proximity to North Georgia wineries, outdoor recreation, and cultural events that run year after year. Honestly, Dahlonega works because it never tried to reinvent itself for retirees. It simply stayed functional, scenic, and predictable, which explains why Town 9 shifts from mountains to water in a way that changes the strategy completely. Town 9, Paducah, Kentucky. Town 9 is Paducah, Kentucky, and this is where a lot of retirement assumptions quietly fall apart. Based on publicly available information, Paducah consistently stands out as a southern river town that balances affordability, culture, and livability without relying on hype. Located at the meeting point of the Ohio and Tennessee rivers, Paducah benefits from natural scenery and recreational access while maintaining a stable, working downtown rooted in 19th century history. The town's size creates a sweet spot where service, healthcare access, and arts infrastructure exist without big city congestion or pricing pressure. You'll notice Paducah shows up repeatedly in arts and livability rankings because of its long-standing investment in creative communities, historic preservation, and walkable neighborhoods rather than rapid expansion. Housing costs remain moderate compared to larger southern metros. Daily expenses stay predictable, and the riverfront setting adds quality of life without resort town volatility. Honestly, what makes Paducah strategic isn't flash, it's consistency. The town functions well year after year, supports retirees without centering everything around them, and offers enough activity to stay engaged without constant stimulation. That quiet balance explains why the next town shifts gears completely, moving from inland rivers to a coastal environment that changes the equation in a very different way. Town 8. St. Augustine, Florida. Town 8 is St. Augustine, Florida, and this town forces a rethink of what retiring in Florida actually means. Based on publicly available information, St. Augustine stands apart from the typical Florida retirement narrative because it blends coastal access with structural stability rather than constant sprawl. Known as the oldest continuously inhabited European-founded city in the United States, St. Augustine carries centuries of preserved architecture and walkable historic districts that naturally limit overdevelopment, which quietly protects livability. You'll notice the pace here feels intentional, not rushed, with daily life shaped by local businesses, long-standing neighborhoods, and year-round community activity instead of seasonal chaos. Coastal access brings sailing, walking beaches, and ocean air. Yet the city functions as a real town rather than a resort strip, which keeps daily expenses more predictable than many headline Florida markets. Healthcare access remains strong due to proximity to larger regional medical networks, while the town's MIEs allows residents to stay connected without feeling boxed in. Honestly, what surprised me most is how St. Augustine balances tourism with everyday life in a way few coastal towns manage, creating a place where retirees coexist with history instead of competing with it. That balance matters because the next town on the list pulls the focus inland again, where southern heat and deep-rooted history reshape the strategy in an entirely different way. Town 7. Natchez, Mississippi. Town 7 is Natchez, Mississippi, and this is where southern retirement takes on a slower, deeper rhythm that most people overlook entirely. Based on widely accessible information, Natchez consistently appears as a town that offers affordability and stability without chasing growth or reinvention. Sitting high above the Mississippi River, Natchez benefits from scenic views, walkable historic districts, and a built environment shaped long before modern sprawl, which naturally limits congestion and unchecked development. You'll notice the town's size works in its favor, large enough to support healthcare facilities, cultural institutions, and everyday services, yet small enough to avoid the pricing pressure seen in faster-growing southern markets. Natchez's deep-rooted history shows up in preserved antebellum homes, riverfront parks, and established neighborhoods that give the town a sense of permanence rather than transition. The climate leans warm for much of the year, which appeals to retirees who prefer consistency over seasonal extremes, while daily life remains predictable and community-centered. Honestly, what stands out most is how Natchez feels unapologetically itself, offering quiet routines, local traditions, and a pace that doesn't demand constant adjustment. That sense of grounded living matters because the next town moves back toward the coast, where water access and low country charm shift the retirement equation once again. Town 6. Beaufort, South Carolina. Town 6 is Beaufort, South Carolina. And this town quietly redefines what coastal retirement in the South can look like without the chaos people expect. Beaufort consistently appears as a place where coastal access and everyday livability stay in balance rather than compete. Set in the low country, along tidal rivers and sea islands, Beaufort benefits from water views, boating access, and historic neighborhoods while avoiding the density and price acceleration seen in larger coastal markets. You'll notice the town's preserved historic district shapes daily life through walkable streets, long-standing homes, and local businesses that cater to residents instead of seasonal surges. The climate stays warm for much of the year, which appeals to retirees seeking consistency. Yet the town's slower growth pattern helps keep services, traffic, and expenses more predictable. Healthcare access remains supported by regional medical systems, while the community itself feels established rather than transitional. Honestly, what makes Beaufort stand out is how it delivers southern coastal charm without trying to upscale itself into something unrecognizable. Life here feels intentional, steady, and rooted, which matters because the next town shifts away from the coast entirely and shows how a college town environment changes the retirement equation in a surprising way. Town 5, Clemson, South Carolina. Town 5 is Clemson, South Carolina, and this is where the college town effect quietly reshapes retirement in ways most people don't expect. Clemson sits along Lake Hartwell at the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains, and that geography alone creates a daily rhythm that blends water, green space, and manageable seasons rather than extremes. Clemson University anchors the local economy, which matters because university towns tend to maintain stable employment, healthcare access, cultural programming, and infrastructure. Even when broader trends shift, you'll notice daily life here feels active without feeling rushed, with walking paths, public events, and a built environment designed for long-term residents rather than constant turnover. Housing costs and everyday expenses remain more controlled than larger southern metros, while proximity to regional medical centers supports aging in place without isolation. The presence of the university also brings lectures, performances, and community engagement that keeps social life varied beyond traditional retirement routines. Honestly, what makes Clemson stand out is how naturally it balances youthful energy with calm living, creating a town that feels alive without being overwhelming. That balance matters, because the next town leaves campus life behind and shifts toward a southern mountain community, where affordability and healthcare access begin to drive the strategy even more clearly. Town 4, Johnson City, Tennessee. Town 4 is Johnson City, Tennessee, and this town quietly dismantles the idea that affordable southern mountain living has to mean isolation or boredom. Johnson City consistently shows up as a place where retirees gain stability without giving up energy. Set in northeast Tennessee near the Appalachian Mountains, the town benefits from scenic surroundings that shape daily life through walking trails, greenways, and views that never feel manufactured. You'll notice Johnson City operates as a regional hub, which matters because it supports a strong healthcare network, including major medical facilities that serve a wide multi-state area, reducing the need for long-distance travel as needs change. The local economy stays balanced through education, healthcare, and small business rather than tourism spikes, keeping housing and daily expenses more predictable than trend-driven markets. The pace feels calm but not sleepy, with live music, local events, and community spaces that stay active year-round without overwhelming residents. Honestly, what stands out most is how Johnson City feels grounded and functional, offering a version of southern mountain life that works long after the excitement of moving fades. That grounded balance sets the stage for the next town, where Florida re-enters the conversation in a way that challenges nearly every retirement stereotype people still believe. Town 3, Gainesville, Florida. Town 3 is Gainesville, Florida, and this town flips the usual Florida retirement narrative on its head. Gainesville consistently appears as a place where retirees get Florida's warmth and services without the coastal volatility that drives costs and stress elsewhere. Gainesville functions as a true year-round city rather than a seasonal destination. anchored by a major research university and a large regional healthcare system that supports long-term stability, specialist access, and consistent employment. You'll notice daily life here feels lived in and practical, with tree-covered neighborhoods, walkable districts, and a pace that stays active without tipping into chaos. Housing and everyday expenses remain more predictable than in resort-heavy Florida markets, while the inland location reduces exposure to some of the insurance pressure tied to coastal living. The climate stays warm. Green spaces are woven throughout the city, and cultural life benefits from lectures, performances, and events that keep social circles diverse across age groups. Honestly, what stands out most is how Gainesville delivers Florida benefits without demanding a Florida lifestyle, which explains why the next town becomes even more selective, shifting the focus to a place many retirees only discover after ruling out everywhere else. Town 2. Prescott, Arizona. Town 2 is Prescott, Arizona, and even though it sits just outside the traditional southern map, it keeps showing up in the same retirement research conversations for a reason. Prescott consistently performs like a southern mountain town that somehow landed in the Southwest. Set at higher elevation than much of Arizona, Prescott avoids extreme desert heat and instead offers 4 defined seasons that feel manageable rather than punishing, which quietly changes daily life and long-term comfort. You'll notice the town's historic layout, dating back to its territorial era roots, creates walkable districts, preserved neighborhoods, and a sense of place that limits sprawl and overbuilding. Prescott functions as a regional center for healthcare and services, which supports aging populations without forcing long drives to larger cities. Housing costs tend to stay below major Arizona metros, while daily expenses remain steadier due to slower growth and a population that values stability over expansion. The cultural scene feels active but grounded, with community events, local arts, and outdoor access woven into everyday routines rather than sold as attractions. Honestly, what stands out most is how Prescott attracts retirees who want calm without isolation and scenery without sacrifice, which sets up the final town perfectly, because the next place takes this idea of intentional living and pushes it into a category entirely its own. Town 1, Eureka Springs, Arkansas. Town 1 is Eureka Springs, Arkansas, and this town breaks almost every traditional rule people associate with retirement in the South, which is exactly why it works. Based on widely accessible public information about safety, living expenses, housing patterns, and population trends, Eureka Springs consistently appears as a place where affordability, individuality, and long-term livability intersect in a way few towns manage. Built into the Ozark Mountains, the town's winding streets and preserved historic buildings naturally limit large-scale development, keeping growth slow, intentional, and resistant to sudden cost spikes. You'll notice Eureka Springs operates less like a typical southern town and more like a self-contained community where daily life revolves around walkability, local businesses, arts, and long-standing traditions rather than expansion or trends. Housing costs and everyday expenses remain accessible compared to many southern destinations, while the town's size supports a close-knit atmosphere that reduces isolation without feeling restrictive. Healthcare access is supported through nearby regional systems, while the town itself prioritizes livability over reinvention. Honestly, what makes Eureka Springs stand apart is how openly it embraces being different, attracting retirees who value character, calm, and authenticity over polish. This is the kind of place people discover after eliminating dozens of options, because once you understand why Eureka Springs works, you realize the strategy was never about fitting in at all. You're probably thinking this kind of place doesn't exist anymore, that every good town has already been discovered, priced up, and packaged for someone else. But towns like this keep proving the opposite, quietly working while everyone's looking somewhere louder. And the unsettling part is realizing how many people scroll past places like this every day without ever seeing what was right in front of them.